That's carried. Thank you. And now we will return to the next question of the draft submission on Environment Canterbury's long-term plan, because disappointingly for me, I've been told that I have to accept this dreadful amendment.
It's healthy for democracy.
And
if there's a second.
no, there will be a seconder, I'm sure. Who would like to second it? Aaron will. Once Sam gave him a nudge across the table, he was happy to apply.
Nothing like a bit of passive pressure from the chair either, is there?
I was expecting it anyway. But you are absolutely wedded to the words, because I mean, Ian did suggest that, asking elected members to direct Environment Canterbury staff to, when they employ one person, it isn't quite.
Would you like to suggest what Ian has suggested?
Yeah. I mean, it's just a slight modification. I'm not going to support it anyway, but
No, you've made that very clear. But what's the wording suggested?
Yes, let Ian.
Yeah.
I was just going to suggest that instead of directing Environment Canterbury staff to reduce the rating burden, replace that with you consider reducing this additional rating burden.
okay.
You just put it through as it is.
We'll leave
Okay.
it as it is. So we've got it's been moved and seconded, and the amendment has been moved and seconded. So I'll open it up for debate, and I'll have debate across the two. Yeah.
I kind of get the gist of the wording without question, but I think it's very hard for us to direct another organisation's staff, and so I do sympathise and agree with the sentiment, but I can't support it with regards to directing others, and so.
Yeah. I mean, just to clarify, because it possibly.
No, we're in debate.
No, I am. I'm just clarifying
Okay.
what you were saying and your passive sort of cheering around it. But when it says we would request, that's a consideration. That's not directing elected members at ECAN. That's saying we would request you to consider it. So I don't really see why people would get wound up on it. I mean, the whole point of this is that we've had public backlash over the fact that ECAN can't tighten their belt or aren't prepared to drive greater operational efficiencies. And I think we should be, as a council, sending some form of direction on behalf of the ratepayers of our constituencies who do raise it with us. I was at Avonhead Mall yesterday on our long-term plan, who were concerned equally at some of the stuff we're doing, but also around ECAN. So I don't think it's unreasonable to put something like this to them. They can reject it. You know, we don't listen to every submission that comes through. We probably don't listen to most of them. But you know, in the end, I think we can send our view down. So I don't think this is unreasonable in the slightest.
Andrew, Sarah, Melanie.
Thank you. I think we need to take this in context. Yes, there's been quite a lot of publicity about it, around the 24% rates rise that ECAN are proposing. It is just a proposal. It's out for public consultation. We know from the workshop we had with ECAN councillors that for Christchurch that means a 3% rates rise. Christchurch is the area that we should be considering. Our role is to represent the people of Christchurch, not to represent necessarily the people of all of Canterbury. To quote something that somebody else might normally say in this room, 24% of what? We're coming off a low base. 24% of a mouse is not 24% of an elephant. Two very different things, coming off a very, very low base. But I think we should be concentrating on what the people of Christchurch would be interested in. I think a 3% rate rise on Christchurch, particularly when we're considering in our own proposal a 5% rates rise ourselves, there is a hypocrisy in asking ECAN to reduce their 3% rates rise when we're proposing a rates rise higher than that of our own. I also think we should be concerned with the reality rather than the perception. The 24% rates rise, yes, will apply to some. typically owners of rural properties, typically owners of large rural properties, typically owners of farms in areas well outside of our district. I'm not in favour of this. I'm very comfortable with the position that we had taken as a council informally for those that were part of that discussion, which was that we wouldn't comment on the ECAN rates rise, and by return we're not expecting them to comment on ours. So I'm very comfortable with the position that we'd already taken in informal discussions between ourselves and Environment Canterbury, where those that were in the room were obviously able to take part in those discussions.
Sarah?
Kia ora. I'll be voting against the amendment today and in favour of our full submission as it stands, because I'm really keen for us to have an outcomes and an environmental issues focus, and the rates that fall out of that when we look after our environment. I completely get that Councillor McDonald's residents may approach him upset about the rates increase, but residents are hosting meetings and protesting across our city on the issues they see at ECAN and the things that need addressing. They're holding meetings and protesting against the nitrates in the water across the region, on air quality both from quarries and from composting in Bromley. These are the things that people say they want from ECAN. They want them to enhance their monitoring, enhance their enforcement, and they're also wanting them to follow the new government standards on a range of things as well. This is what I'm hearing from residents who contact me, this is what I see on the social media feeds, and this is what I see from people actually gathering together and gathering a wider support base across the city in many meetings and protests, and also what we've heard today. Thank you.
Melanie?
The same as Sarah, I'll be approving 1 and 2 and not the amendment. Look, I wanted actually to say that we supported option 1 and to make that clear, not to have any mention of the rates rise, but because of what option 1 that ECAN is presenting is trying to achieve, such as implementing investment into things like the government's essential freshwater package, wanting to put more into the public transport network space, increasing frequency and selected routes, moving to low and zero emission vehicles, etc. They also want to put more into biosecurity, environmental restoration, river works, and there's so much stuff that they want to do that if you do for option, if they do less, then our environment will suffer, and so the fiscal restraint in terms of the environment, you've got to weigh those two things up, and I think the environment's way more important than a couple of dollars to everybody every week.
Anyone else? I've just Aaron?
Yeah, I will comment on this because I don't think this is rude. I think it's responsible that we comment on the rates. Some people, and you can speak of the mouse all you want, but in some parts of my neighbourhood that's the size of a rat, because we've got people paying more than $2,500, $4,000 to ECAN in rates. The irony is paying $1,500 a year for a bus that's 2 kilometres away is an interesting subsidy. A 24% increase should alarm anyone, and as a council it's our job, I think, to speak up. The fact that there was a secret meeting or a meeting without the public where a deal was done between the councils to not speak about it publicly should raise people's eyebrows as well. Oh, did that not happen?
Sorry, no, I'm just gonna step in here because I'm not having that sort of assertion being made. So
sorry, I thought I heard that.
no, if you would like to reframe that to a workshop between councillors and councillors of Christchurch City Council and ECAN, as we meet with councillors of Waimakariri District Council, as we meet with Selwyn District Council. But this was one with the Environment Canterbury councillors, and it did discuss both of our long-term plans.
Yeah, okay, so then, and obviously at that it was agreed that as a council we wouldn't speak about the rates rise, which no, it wasn't agreed.
Maybe if you'd been
there.
I was at another meeting.
Anyway, look, it's unhelpful, Aaron, please.
Okay. Then I'll just draw attention to some of the rate rises. Like I saw in their chart that in 10 years' time, the spend on buses per year will be $150 million, which is a phenomenal amount of money. When the increase, so you're going to more than double the spend on buses, but not double the patronage, because even our own staff said that the bus usage will only go up by 40%. So that there is essentially is an increase in the amount of carbon. I realise that buses will be switching to electric, but it's not certainly in the government's plan to have all vehicles electric by that time. And they haven't, yeah, the buses might be, but it's $750,000 per bus. I don't think that's factored into their equations either. So it is our role to comment on our fellow councils. They can listen if they want, but it is responsible for us to do that. And at a time when inflation's incredibly low, we should not be forcing faux inflation upon the economy by ramping up taxes, and this is another tax of 24%. And yes, it does come from a small base in some parts, but in other areas it's not a small base. It's an incredible amount of money. It's more than $1,000 for some households.
Thank you. Anne?
I agree that it is our role to be responsible and to discuss and converse with our fellow councils, but I also think it's important that we make informed comment about their work and what they're doing. I think it's about respect. I haven't sat in the chamber with my environmental ECAN councillors and gone through the process that they've gone to get to this point. And obviously we've heard that 24% is not the rate that's going to be applied to the residents of the city. So it's about respect, and I would expect the same back from them. They haven't sat with us through the hours and hours of combing through every line with our LTP. So it's up to the people of Christchurch to give that feedback to them, not us.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you. I'll support the 1 and 2, but not the amendment. And I guess, you know, it's always a little bit disappointing, I guess, when a number of councillors see a headline and run off to the media with their own wee story of actually getting proper information about the impact it has on Christchurch City people who were actually elected to represent. Had they got that information, perhaps some of this misinformation that continually goes into the media would have been correct.
Yanni?
Yeah, thank you. You know, I just wanted to pick up on the point that was made, because we sat here earlier and heard deputations from people extremely concerned about the impact of quarries and the lack of responsiveness. I don't think we can really ask ECAN to do things and then say, actually, we want you to cut funding towards those things. Probably the issue of PT, I mean, in our submission, we've actually talked about the fact that there is kind of a lack of visibility about where some of that money's going, and I do think that's actually a real missed opportunity. We need a much bolder transport vision that transforms our public transport in the city if we want people to use it, and I just do personally feel that we're spending a lot of time on doing things that we've always done with slight tweaks rather than really being radical. And if you look at the rail that's going in up in Auckland, for example, I think there's a lot better systems that we should be looking at and considering. But fundamentally, you know, people actually want greater responsiveness from ECAN around protecting the environment, whether it's quarries, whether it's the organics plant. Literally thousands and thousands of complaints go unanswered when it comes to our environment in our city because ECAN do not have the resourcing to respond. I want them to respond. I want them to actually look after the health of our environment for the sake of our community wellbeing. So I'm not going to support the amendment that's been put forward. But I do think we should always be encouraging organisations to consider carefully how they spend money and to spend it in a wise and prudent fashion. But I don't think it's fair to ask for them to do more and then turn around and say we want you to cut the funding.
I just want to comment on the submission itself. I think it is really important that we do represent the interests of our constituents, but we do have to make sure that what we do is within the bounds of what we can do. And I get utterly frustrated when I see really good people from the community who turn up here looking for a solution that we can't offer them because of the restrictions or the implications or the boundaries set by the Resource Management Act or by whatever functional separation there is between the different arms of government. So many things that people come here for that are the decision of central government, so many, as we've heard today, the purview of the regional council. And it is frustrating that we end up having these debates around headlines and slogans instead of debating the real, serious, challenging issues that we have as a city in the context of our regional council's long-term plan. This is a submission on their long-term plan. We've been asked to look at things like nitrates. Can you imagine what it would be like if nitrates were able to find their way into our aquifers? All of the chlorine in the world doesn't protect us from nitrates. Can you imagine what the position of this city will be when a future council has to deal with the nitrates in the system, within the aquifer system, that is then meaning that it has to be extracted in some way before it can be delivered at all. So all I'm saying is that there are serious issues that we do need to have to front up to. There are matters within our own LTP which will generate significant debate, and we have to debate them maturely and sensibly. But focusing on one aspect of it, a headline story, doesn't cut the mustard. It isn't what we are elected to do. It isn't what the Local Government Act requires us to do. We are required to think for the current generation, but also for future generations as well. And there are decisions that we are making now that will have an impact on decisions in the future. It is the same for ECAN. Let them make the decision around the rates implications of the final LTP that they sign off on, and let us make the decision about the rates impact of the final LTP that we sign off on. So on that note, I will put the amendment. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Can you put up your hands? It's probably easier. Goff, Chu, McDonald, Major, and Kyo. And that's lost. And those opposed say no. That's lost. And I will put the full motion. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. That's carried, and the same people oppose making submissions on all those issues. Record it. No? Sorry, put up your hand for no. Same. No, that people will be interested. Yep, thank you. Right. Yeah, same. So that is carried.